Hi, everyone. Welcome to People Potential. I'm your host, Amanda Fleising, and I'll be bringing on various guests to discuss empowering individuals and organizations to achieve their full potential. In today's episode, we'll cover a subject that is very dear to us, behaviors at work, and this time specifically looking at psychometric assessments. Some HR professionals are skeptical. They wonder, can these assessments really help my organization increase performance metrics towards reaching our business goals? Some of you might have even tried different options. There are certainly a lot of them out there. So, over the next 10 minutes, we'll give you the key elements to keep in mind when it comes to selecting a psychometric assessment tool to help fix performance and turnover issues in your organization. Our guest today is none other than my colleague, Carolyn Hass, who is the VP of Product and R&D at SuccessFinder. For any listeners that don't know her, Carolyn is a thought leader and operations executive in the HR technology space. So at SuccessFinder, she owns the end-to-end product life, driving corporate strategy execution through the design and development of data-driven tech solutions. She is also a master trainer and facilitator, building on extensive experience as a consultant, focusing on the topics of self-awareness for professional growth and for leadership development. Thanks so much for joining me today, Carolyn. I'm really thrilled to have you on board as my very first guest.
I'm super happy to be here.
So let's start this interview off by jumping right into the heart of things. How can a robust psychometric assessment help organizations reach new levels of performance?
It's a really good question. If organizations aren't that familiar with using assessment tools, there are a lot of really great benefits to integrating an assessment into your process. The first one is that it allows you to potentially measure things that are difficult to observe directly. So there are some things that do impact or can impact a person's performance, their engagement, their satisfaction that aren't always something you may have the chance to observe in an interview for a candidate or even working with them. So these could be underlying attitudes, certain behavioral styles related to how they handle stressors. You're not always going to be in the room with them observing certain behaviors, and some happen maybe a bit more on an internal level. So that's one of the ways that psychometric assessments can add, allow you to see a little more than what you can observe directly. One of the basic ones is, especially in the case of, a questionnaire, you're kind of adding another objective data source to the assessment of an individual. We call this multimodal assessment, many different ways and information sources that are going to come together in your decision-making process. And this can sometimes help add another layer of objectivity to maybe other sources that have a bit more inherent bias built into them. So depending on how you feel about interviews, we can all agree that, in an interview, you yourself are judging an individual based on your perception of them. They themselves are, influencing your perception in certain subtle ways. So you may come to certain conclusions about a candidate, like, oh, this person, based on what they're telling me, seems like really reliable, responsible candidate. And you're going to think that maybe they're better than another candidate based on this perception. And you may want to add other methods to be able to maybe confirm this or, reduce the uncertainty that you're just relying on a perception. So that's another thing that can be a relevant use case. And one of the most interesting ones, at least for me from a research perspective, is that you can use it to also predict future outcomes based on the stability of your measure over time. So some assessments that allow you to collect numerical data, what's interesting is that you can maybe pair that with other numerical data that you collect, like performance or engagement ratings, and you can start to do some analyses on the relationship between these two variables. So you could study the relationship between the frequency of certain manager behaviors and the level of engagement of their teams. Or, if you can quantify the relationship, you can start to see how they influence each other. And that can become really interesting to not only improve your process, but also just have a more data-driven approach in general.
That is definitely so interesting. I love seeing the scientific side and how with psychometric assessments, you can gain this incredible predictive insight. And it also brings us back to the series of articles our content team has written, of course, in collaboration with subject matter experts on the topic of bias. So to our listeners, if you're interested in bias in the workplace, you can find the articles on the library section of our site, and I'll be sure to post them in the show notes.
Yeah, those articles are a really great way to start to sensitize people to some biases that are maybe, unintentional. They fall under the radar, they're subtle, but it's a good thing to just watch out for and be aware of. And on our side, it's just one of the ways that you can continue to ensure that you're making decisions as an organization that are, more and more data driven, which can add a lot of accuracy and precision to your decision. Especially in decisions like hiring, for example, that have a lot of uncertainty and guesswork attached to them. You're trying to predict something that's going to happen in the future.
Absolutely. I know I, for one, am always looking to back my decisions with data, allowing me to feel more confident in them. So whether it's in marketing, but also for our HR teams, of course. So what should organizations be looking for when investigating different psychometric assessments?
This is a really important question, right? Not all assessments are created equally, but obviously the strength of any psychometric assessment, no matter what you're measuring with it, can be measured in terms of the degree to which its methods, how it was created, are objective, valid, reliable. So those are kind of like the basics, but a lot of times what some people are looking for, and that's important, is you want to make sure the assessment is also not easy to fake or game. That's something I hear a lot, especially when it comes to recruiting, hiring. Many of these tools are self-report, and there are, in some cases, ways to make yourself appear more favorably, or ways that an item can be presented that just seems really obvious to the person responding how I should respond towards this. So you'll want an assessment that maybe has some built-in measures to capture some of this, flag socially desirable behaviors or patterns that might allow you to have a bit of suspicion that this is not exactly the most accurate portrait of the individual. One of the things that's also really important when kind of assessing what kind of tool you want to use is it kind of depends how precise you want to be. There are many tools out there. Depends what kind of outcome you're looking for, what kind of information you're looking to add to your process. So when it comes to personality and behavioral styles, you may be tempted to go for something that is, simple, what we call type indicators. It'll, classify an individual on like 8 to 10 different styles, and you can already get a quick sense of, okay, are they more like this or are they more like this? It's a bit of an either or, and they're going to fall neatly into one of your categories. What's nice about these, they offer some pretty simplified generalities about a person's style, very easy to interpret because most of the nuances are left out. You're either one thing or you're another, and there's only a few things you can kind of be. However, for something as complex as personality and people in general, I'm very passionate about like those nuances that make each individual unique. I think people are idiosyncratic, they're nuanced, they're complicated, and that's where personality trait type indicators can bring a lot more variance or bring to light those nuances, which I think is something kind of, interesting if you want to capture that.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I'm also a huge believer in the idea that everyone is unique, a unique individual. No two people are exactly alike. So
exactly. And it's not necessarily, the idea is not that you become a psychologist and to be able to understand some of those complexities, but a simple analogy that I like is like blood test versus a DNA test, right? Especially nowadays, like DNA testing is actually pretty democratized in a lot of ways. But, if all you want to know is, am I an AB blood type? Who can I donate to? Who can I receive blood to? Then that's the test you need. You don't need much more than that. So, that's fine. You'll be categorized in the group and you'll know what you need to know. But if what you're looking for is, you want a DNA test, you want to show genetic markers you want to have much more specificity about, you and how you're built and what's specific there. Your DNA is unique, it belongs to you. Then, what you're looking at is more the combination of characteristics that make you who you are. And personality and behavior assessments can be classified similarly in that way. It's an analogy that I like to use.
Sold. I want the DNA test, please.
For sure. So this applies to your psychometric assessments, the level of precision and accuracy you're looking for based on what you need to do with that information. I will say though that there are some things you just can't know from a less precise test. And you want to be very careful not to make overgeneralizations or read into a type that by definition is meant to kind of be a broader generalization, but it's not going to capture some of those unique nuances. So that precision is not being captured by a test like that. So it's important to not try to extrapolate too much just based on that if it's not being measured.
Absolutely. And that's a whole separate conversation that we can start on that topic for sure. But tell me, Carol, as the product expert at SuccessFinder, what's special about SuccessFinder's unique science? And what is it that will ensure someone's workforce reaches top performance levels?
Great question. Obviously, some of the things I think are really unique to SuccessFinder's approach, we're really looking to maximize an individual's potential. So to do that, you have to really understand who they are and who they're not. So this means really appreciating and understanding those nuances that make them unique. We don't want to speak in generalities. We want to give our clients relevant information about an individual's style. We want people to understand their style, help them become aware of their unique strengths, their blind spots, but also even empower their employers with these insights to better coach them, better develop them, develop future leaders and build stronger teams. So our science is on the more precise side of things so that we can provide that depth of insight that adds a tremendous value, a lot of incremental value. This precision really also helps us uncover more accurate relationships between behavioral styles and key outcomes that matter to organizations. So, the relationship between very specific traits and performance that we can demonstrate because we're getting really precise here. The relationship between certain leadership behaviors and engagement, the relationship between certain team dynamics and productivity. The more precise we can get, the more we can uncover and detect things that really make a difference. And that I think is really important. You get more targeted, more focused in your organizational initiatives. We learn more about what really impacts the outcomes we care about.
I mean, of course, I'm biased in that I work at SuccessFinder, but I can honestly say that this assessment and the insights derived have really changed my life. I mean, the more I dove into my results, the more I became amazed with just how in-depth and accurate my behavior profile is, and how much I've been able to actually use them in my own career, personal development, alone, with my team, and actually with my manager. So let's dig into this a little bit more. Can you please explain to our audience just how a SuccessFinder profile can help an employee better develop capabilities for their role and also for the future?
For sure. So I think that there are a few things, at the individual level, there are a lot of things that you can kind of reflect on, or how do I take my development? How do I really use this information? And I always like to start, comes down to self-awareness. You have to want to know this about yourself. You're opening up the hood and you're trying to really understand how you are, how that impacts, those around you. Are you having the impact you're looking for when you intend to do certain things? So self-awareness is kind of the main goal because it can unlock a lot of things. The first one is, take ownership of your strengths, your natural styles, the things that really got you where you are. I find too many people ignore that and they're just like, what do I need to improve on? Well, keep in mind your strengths are a big part of what you bring every day. Lean into it, leverage it more, see how you can apply it more, rather than to just assume that it's, yeah, sure, I'm a good communicator, but who cares? No, leverage that more. The second one is kind of identifying some step changes that you want to make. So by step change, I mean more, think of your current role, the next role you're kind of aiming for, or the people you work with, the environment you're in. there may be things that are already in your wheelhouse, kind of natural for you, not your favorite way of behaving, but you really feel like if you had the chance to practice it more or you can leverage it more, it's not that far out of your reach. It's kind of like flexing your muscle, kind of developing that muscle, but it's something that you could really take advantage of. The third one is really, what are things that are not natural to you, right? These are things that you may continuously struggle with. They never really seem to get easier. They're going to take a lot more effort for you to really kind of, develop into something a little different. You have to really adjust your style and identify triggers, moments when you can practice it. What's stopping you from feeling more comfortable with certain behaviors? They've caused you a lot of difficulty in the past. There's a lot of self-reflection, but at a certain point, you'll be so attuned to what that is. Why didn't I have that impact? Ugh, I know it's this thing that's still kind of difficult for me. You can start to have a bit more of a personalized approach to your development. So that's one of the knock-on effects of this information can also empower your managers. They can be a lot more effective in coaching. You said that, your experience with this tool kind of like changed your life when you really got to see all of this on yourself. That's the first impact. And me too, when I first started using it, I was really looking at my own behavior. But now as a manager, as a leader, I use this with my teams a lot. Like, we have very personalized discussions about their profile, where we should really focus more, and how it's going to be related to the work they want to do. So developing people in the right direction and feeling very equipped to have those targeted, personalized conversations. That's what managers need. They need the tools to have this conversation in an authentic way. And maybe if you take it one step back, an interesting part about this is if it's happening at the individual level, it's happening at the team level and with manager conversations, even as an organization, you're gathering a lot of people data, you're getting very targeted behavioral data and insights that you can start to look at your workforce through this and start to see trends and patterns that can be directly related to your strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that's what a lot of our clients are doing, and that's how they use SuccessFinder to really empower and themselves as an HR team and have those key insights on their workforce. And then, of course, it flows down through the managers and to the individual level. So I love that explanation. And thank you so much again for taking the time to come chat with me about people potential. And I'm sure our audience will gain several valuable insights from this interview. I know I did. And it's always a pleasure. I hope to have you back on another episode later this year.
For sure, I could chat about this for hours.
Thanks for joining us today on People Potential with Amanda. I appreciate each and every listen and view. You can find the show notes on the SuccessFinder blog or library, and be sure to follow us on LinkedIn and subscribe to our newsletter for all kinds of value-added content. Until next time, stay curious.